All right. Hello, everybody. Happy fall. If you didn't see it on Instagram, I posted when I was walking home today because I was wearing a white shirt earlier, which I changed out of because we're going to play with some of the ink today. So I didn't think a white shirt was very appropriate, and it's almost never appropriate for me. It's just asking for trouble. So we're going to get a little messy today. We'll do our normal first live stream of the box by playing with the materials, trying them out. We'll respond to the prompt that's in our menu. And we'll have a little time to work with some of the ephemera and do some things that I like to do when I'm starting out a journal. So we can switch now to the overhead camera and make sure it gets into focus. Okay, perfect. All right, I was telling Sarah, I had to do a little bit of a setup difference because this journal opens on the short edge. So in order to fit everything in the screen, I had to do a little adjusting. So what I have on my surface is I have all of our mark making tools. I have the matte medium, I have the ink, I have a jar with plain water in it, and I have an empty jar. So that's where I wanted to start today. I've done a little bit of play on my journal cover so far. In order to accentuate the texture on the cover, I took a white crayon and a white colored pencil and just did some rubbing on here. This is white acrylic paint and paint pen, ArtJournalSnacks sticker, and I wrote that this one is for fall 2023. And I decided to date the journal by the day that it arrived. So mine arrived in my P.O. box on October 6th. And then I found some interesting textures that talked about the change of seasons. The photograph that I took while teaching the other day, read a page about and the work in progress and kind of how my life is right now. So it was responding to that. And this was the message that I kind of wanted to be with today while we're playing in this journal. And also when we think about this whole season of fall and trying to be ready for anything. This is a season with a lot of change in it, a lot of change in the scenery, a lot of change in how our day goes, change in temperature, change in what we can see in the grocery store. And so having this approach to change, I think is a good way to dive into this, to be ready for anything. So I'm going to take us to a blank page. And one of the things that I really love about this journal is that it's a sewn spine binding. So you can get these spots where you actually find the thread, which is fun to find. And I wanted to play first with the ink. So this is an India ink. And so we'll do the same thing that we've done in the past where we play with one material in 3 ways. And so the first one is to just go straight out of the ink container itself. And you can experiment with all the different ways that you can make marks. Sammy's gonna experiment in the background with all the different ways that she can make beeps in the microwave and the fire alarm, along with some whistling. So one of the things to watch when you're just doing this line work is that the more that you twist this, you can get a thinner line or a thicker line. And then as the ink runs out, you get kind of more of a dry brush look. And so making marks like this when you're just getting familiar with the tool is helpful, because if you're doing something where you want like that scratchy ink look, to kind of make your darker lines elsewhere so that you can end up with this more scribbly, scratchy, dry brush look. Okay. So the other thing you can do, so that was turning the little nib dropper thing on the side. Now, if you put it with the open end down, you can get more of a solid ink area. So you can experiment with that a little bit, making kind of big areas of ink. Noticing how If you lift it up at the end, you can kind of get more like a drawing, or you can keep it very flat and end up with a solid ink area. One of the really nice things about Indian ink is how dark it is. It's really a rich material. So the next thing you can experiment with is kind of pushing down and then gradually lifting up at the end. You end up with a bold line, and then see if you can get it lighter and lighter and thinner by turning it on its side. You can see me kind of rotate my wrist as I'm doing this. Just experiment with that a few times. The best way to get familiar with a tool is to do something like this, where you're just repeating the same process over and over, learning something from it each time. I can fit one more in there. This one, I'm kind of running out of ink. Cool. You can kind of see what happens there. All right, so now we're going to play with these droppers. I know some people have played with them a little bit already. You never knew you were going to get science supplies in your Art Journal Snacks box, but here we go. So I'm just going to pipe a little bit in there. There's just a little bit of water. And I'm just going to shake this to get a couple drops of ink in there. And I'll swirl it around a little. So you can see that's still pretty dark, but it's a little bit watered down. Brush. So way lighter than using it straight out of the bottle. And this brush has nice stiff bristles, so the less ink and water that are on the brush, the more you can play at that look with the bristles. So again, just kind of experimenting, making a bunch of different marks and seeing what happens. And we'll save the last half of this page for one more try. I think I said 3 different ways, but we're doing a lot more than 3 different ways of using this ink, right? So the last thing we'll do, I'll wash my brush off a little. And if you haven't heard me say this before, this is my favorite thing to put down on the surface when I know I'm going to be messy. This is a dog training pad that I have down on my surface. And it's really great for when you want to work fast and change materials and you don't want to constantly be going back and forth to the sink. This is good if you happen to be the kind of person that makes messes and probably shouldn't wear white dress shirts. Okay, so I've kind of saturated this area here. I'm going to go back to my dropper and suck up some of this ink. And now I'm just going to experiment with slowly. I'm just barely pressing down. And you can see that where the dropper is touching this wet paper, I'm actually getting a little tiny line. Almost like the dropper itself is a mark making tool. It's actually scratching into the surface of the paper. One of the things I really love about this journal is the texture of the paper and the way that can become part of the art that we make. Experiment with getting a little more scribbly, squeezing out a little more ink. It's kind of like, like a tattoo process for the art journal. So squeeze the rest of that back into my jar and we'll let that sit for a bit. All right, so see these little areas here where it's starting to drip. If I want that to not drip off the page, one tip you can do is have a little paper towel or Kleenex, but I find that paper towel works a little better. You can squeeze it into a little ball It's a great trick for watercolor too. If you have a spot where you ended up with too much water, but you can just kind of soak up those little puddles a little bit. And then you can see how there was no drawing that happened here with no tool. It was just using that dropper as a mark making tool. And then now I have this, right? So everything can be an art tool. Now I have this saturated piece of paper towel. And don't get me wrong, I love a good paintbrush, but sometimes using a non-paintbrush can get you some really interesting marks. So this page started out as kind of an experiment and exercise, but now it's starting to get a little bit more evocative, right? A little more, maybe some kind of content starting to come into these marks that I'm making. And when you do a page like this, don't think at the beginning about like, oh, this page is going to be about any kind of topic. Just let yourself experiment. And I find very often the content, right, the more emotional piece maybe, or the personal piece will come as I continue to work on it. And that might not be today, right? You might do a page like this where you're experimenting with a tool and trying it out. And then you look at it on a different day and you say like, oh, that's what this was about. And then you can add more content in, right? You can kind of see where these lines, maybe they end up becoming spots for writing, or maybe these ones do. Or maybe there's a letter that gets collaged in on each of these dark areas. A lot of different possibilities that you could explore. Okay, so I am going to set this one carefully aside. And lucky for us, I'm going to let that one dry. And I have a second journal with the same format for exactly this reason, being able to set it aside. We'll go to page. So this one already has some dried ink on it. And if you haven't experimented yet with this ink, I recommend watering it down a little bit when it's in its pure format. Putting salt into it, it doesn't always work reliably, but if you water it down a bit, like I just showed with the pipette, then the salt will play, right? So you can see there was a pretty big chunk of salt right there. So I wanted to show you next something that I actually learned from a former coworker of mine, another art therapist. And we very often would work with oil pastel when we were doing what we call in art therapy supervision, right, where we kind of get together and talk about what's going on in our workplace and talk about clients preserving their HIPAA rights, of course, but talking about situations and getting assistance, help from each other. And I would watch her with the oil pastels, and she would just sit there and cover her paper with layers of oil pastel. And I was like, what is she doing? What is going on over there? And then as the hour would go on, after she had done a couple different layers, like I'm doing right now, she'd go back in. Sometimes she'd use her fingernail. For the sake of my fingers today, I'm going to use the pencil. But she would go back in and scratch away back into that oil pastel. And so this is kind of similar to what we did for those of you that were around. We had the Marabou art crayons, but this, I feel like the pigment is a little more fine. And so you can get a lot more like detail and variation. And I'd watch her do this, and she'd just like keep going and keep layering and adding more. And was just fascinating to watch this process. It was just, you know, on plain old newspaper or newsprint or, you know, printer paper, nothing fancy, but they would end up looking like these amazing oil paintings that she'd done. So a couple tips for the oil pastel. If you're working in a room where the heat is on or you're working in a warm area, they will be kind of melty. And that's just the nature of a high quality oil pastel. If you've only ever used kind of student grade oil pastels, this is going to be, it's going to feel a little different. You'll be like, oh, why is this breaking? Well, the good news is, even if the end breaks off, it still works. If you are working somewhere warm, I find that sticking it in the freezer for a little while will help you be able to use it a little bit more comfortably. Not too long. You don't want an icicle, but cool it down a little bit. It'll warm up with your hands also, so just so you need to know. And it's just because it's that high quality pigment. Okay, so I'm going to do something kind of messy now. I'm going to start smearing this a little bit with my hands. And because this journal has such nice thick pages, you can really stand up to this in a different way than the journals we were using before. This toned paper really likes to have thick materials on them. A lot of materials, great for mixed media. The only thing it's not awesome for is doing rubbings, but there are lots of ways around it, which I'm sure we'll explore as we go through the box. Okay, so you can see now where in some of these areas I've kind of blended it back so far with my finger that almost blending into the color of the page itself. With a little bit more on this. I really don't have a plan for this. I'm just playing with the surface a little bit. Creating an environment that might become the home for some writing, or maybe a cool piece of ephemera that I want to collage in here. When you have thicker areas of the oil pastel, you can also do kind of an impasto technique and even put your own fingerprints in there. So if you're not worried about that you might leave this live stream today and go commit a crime, go ahead and stick your fingerprints right in there. I just got fingerprinted for work, so I'm in the clear. So go a couple of fingerprints here. I feel like this page maybe wants a little bit of ephemera. And one of the things I got in my ephemera class was a piece of fabric. And I can see my glue and it's a little bit out of reach, but never fear, we have matte medium. So you don't always have to use a palette. Sometimes I like to just squeeze the matte medium out right onto the paper itself. I'm actually using the brush for this. So if you're using it like a glue, you want to put it on pretty thickly. Okay, pretty thick layer medium on. And then I have a decision to make. Do I want the edge with the painting shears to show up? And I do, which means that I need to make a decision about whether I want it to cross the gutter here or if I want to cut it. I think I want it to cross the gutter, even though that might make it a little hard for my book to close because that's pretty thick, but that's okay. I'm just gonna spread that matte medium around a little bit. And now that I have this fabric texture on here, and you can also do this with like a textured paper. And I'm gonna go back over this now with the oil pastel. And I'm doing this really lightly. If you push too hard with the oil pastel onto fabric or very textured paper, you're gonna probably waste your whole pastel. Shouldn't say waste. You're going to use up your whole pastel. Art is never a waste. You'll learn something. But what's kind of cool about doing this oil pastel on fabric is it really does get that effect of an oil painting, right? Because as you build it up more, as you can see here with the white, it fills in those cracks in the fabric and it really looks like oil on canvas, because it is. This actually worked out really nicely because the fabric sample that I happen to get is exactly the right color with the brown oil pastel. So I can almost use the oil pastel to do that lost and found edge in a few spots here, where we're not really sure where the fabric ends and where the paper begins. The matte medium will dry pretty quickly. So as I drag the oil pastel over that surface, process called scumbling. Get that nice texture there. Really careful. I can have to play up those pencil lines that I did around my fingerprints. Now, I'm just barely touching the surface. I'm kind of letting gravity do the drawing right now. I'm not pushing at all. And again, this is one of those things that you just have to kind of learn about a new tool, is what happens when I push really hard? What happens when I barely touch the surface at all? And what do I like? Right? What is more kind of my authentic way of making marks with this tool? And I feel like I say this every live stream, but that's one of the things that I really love about art journaling is this is a container for that exploration. And you can try something and say, I really don't like that. And lucky for you, you've got some very dark black ink. So if you don't like it, just paint it all over. Make a big mess. And then create something else. If you really don't like it, glue those two pages together, and then you've got something really interesting that you can create with. So I like what's happening on this side, and I feel like this side is untapped potential. So I'm going to see if there's anything in my little pile of ephemera here that might go nicely with this. I see a couple options. This maybe is going too bright, the green of this paper. I'm going to set that one aside for a minute. I could go into a different color altogether, but I feel like anytime I've got red and green together, it starts yelling about Christmas at me, and I'm just not ready for that season. Let's stay with fall. That's kind of interesting because of the texture and the lines here, kind of like some of the lines up in here. And the thing I like about this bit of tissue paper, so for any of the others of you who've got some of this or some other interesting tissue papers, those actually came from one of my favorite art teachers of all time, Joanne Buell-Ruggles. And she gave me a big stack of interesting tissue paper, knowing that I could pass it along to all of you. And also in this pass box, 12 people, I believe, 12 or 13 people received some mixed media collages that she had started and wanted to pass along. I wonder if anyone who got one of those is in today's live stream with us. You should let us know in the comments. Okay, so you can see how nicely the matte medium works with tissue paper. Just really goes right on there. And then I have this other interesting paper, like a mixture of, I don't know, it has the feel to my fingers like dryer sheet, but I know it's some kind of paper. It's not quite rice paper, but it feels a little bit like that. It has a little bit of an embossed pattern on it, but I feel like that's maybe going to disappear. That's okay. That torn edge look. So something to think about with any of these fancy papers is, where do you have a flat, straight edge where you cut it with scissors or paper cutter, and where do you have that nice, ragged, torn edge? And playing with those two different things. I want to make my torn edges face each other here. So can you paint matte medium over your oil pastel? Yes, you can. You have to do this kind of softly. I would recommend actually using a softer brush than the one we got in the box if you go over the oil pastel. Can you use the other brush? Absolutely. You just want to be gentle. If you scrub at it with those stiffer bristles, you'll brush away your textures. So we have a couple of advantages of working with the matte medium in this season, fall. Less risk of your pages sticking together after they dry. There's still a possibility, but in the summer, I find that a regular matte medium sometimes will get stuck. Things to be aware of. And I'm going to use my same pencil again, and I'm now scratching into the matte medium and into the oil pastel to get a little bit more texture. See what happens there, where it goes from just the white to the white with the green underneath. It's almost like a scratch board that you created yourself and that you can continue to play with in all sorts of different layering. Because after this matte medium dries, you could go in again with another layer, right? Like I might decide that I like the lightness over on this side and add a little bit more white oil pastel to kind of come across these two pages. Here, I think I want to have just for a little balance, a little bit more of that white over here.
Hey, Erin, Sarah jumping in here. Just let you know that we are a half hour in, so you've got an hour left. Went by really fast.
That's how it goes when you're having fun. All right. So let's see. I'm gonna set this one aside now. You can see there's lots of material there on that page that needs to dry. So we'll set that aside. I'm gonna get the other journal back out. And you can see we're almost all the way dry here. There's a few wet spots at the end. There's a couple wet spots over there. So while we wait for that last little spot to dry, we'll go ahead and get ready for the bonus prompts. So you can always find the bonus prompts inside the back of the menu for the month. And you don't have to cut it out. I just kind of find it's a fun little piece of ephemera to play with. So our bonus prompt this month is to create a Venn diagram, 3 empty overlapping circles, and fill the circles with words, lines, shapes, and color to represent different parts of yourself. So I am. Just put this piece of paper towel in here just for those last little wet spots. I think I'm going to create this just on one side. And if this is your first time with this very fine point pen, it's one of my favorites. I got really excited when we decided to include it because I love this pen. You can get such tiny little lines with it. It's very satisfying. If you have a lot to say and you want to write a whole bunch on one of your pages, you can write very small with this pen. So that's great for doing something like a Venn diagram where you need to squeeze a lot of words sometimes into little overlapping spaces. Okay. So it doesn't have to be perfect. My garlic container lid was definitely not exactly round, and that's okay, right? You can also freehand it. They don't have to be perfect circles. I'm gonna put my prompts. I'll put it right here. Okay. So fill them with words, lines, shape, and color to represent different parts of yourself. So because this is something I'm thinking about a lot right now, I'm going to say this one is my work self. This one is my art self. And I'm going to turn this so that we all are kind of facing the center. Of course, there's a bunch of different ways to do this, but this is just what comes to mind for me right now as I'm having lots of transitions in my life, as many of you know. So thinking about where work and art overlap for me. Art therapy. Thinking where art and home overlap. And that is at morning art play. Let's see, where home and work overlap. I think for many of us over these past couple of years, this has been a very blurry section because much of our work life has been invited into our homes. I'm working now on trying to make that more of a separate thing. So home is okay. So I'm not sure that entirely fits with the way that I've done the rest of this, but I wrote a space for transition in between home and work because that feels like a really important thing for me to be aware of. And then what is in the middle? What is the blend between work and art and home? For me, this is a word that someone very connected with the work that I'm doing now has been writing a lot about. And actually, a lot of us have been writing and thinking a lot about this. So I guess for me, the joining of my home, my art, and my work, this is very joyful when all these things are in relationship to each other. So I'm going to use the gold paint pen now. Just add a little bit of accentuation around this center area. And as you work on yours, it's okay if, like, you know, some of them maybe you don't have words. Maybe some of them are just images or colors. There's no wrong or right way to do this. Okay if your circles don't overlap perfectly according to geometry. You don't have to get out a special measuring tool to make this work. You can just do it in whatever way makes sense for you. You use the copper one, you just go around the edges here. I love the way the metallic pens look on this toned paper. I love the contrast between this very shiny pen and the matte surface. I think because the paper is white, I'm going to go back to my oil pastel now. Again, this is a fun thing that we get to experiment with this box with the toned papers. We can really play with light materials a lot more, right, than when you have a light colored journal. And then I have a little bit of gold paper. I'm going to show using this in two different ways, just because I think this is an important thing to know about. I'm going to glue one on with a glue stick. Little pastel on there with my finger. Right. And then I am going to use the matte medium to put the other one on. I'm going to go over the top of it. And so keyword here being matte medium. You can see already it's a little bit changing the look. And so that's just kind of a fun thing to know if you're working with materials that have a lot of gloss to them. If you want to take down that gloss or that shine, you want it to look maybe a little more vintage or antique, then you can do that with the matte medium. And if you really scrub at this paper, it's actually it's a wrapping paper. And if you scrub at it, you can see what I'm doing with my finger. I'm actually lifting some of that gold pigment off the top and moving it around. And this is the kind of thing that you really only discover when you mess around with materials. Right? If you just glue everything on with a glue stick and keep it all really clean, don't get your fingers dirty. Which I know for some people, like, that's your preferred way of being in the world, and that's fine. But for the sake of mixed media fun, I encourage you to get a little messy, because sometimes you find a way of using materials that ends up being just exactly what you needed.
Hey, Erin, Sarah here. Two things. One is, can you give us like a close-up of that gold? Yeah. I like seeing the texture.
You can see where I've almost rubbed the gold pigment off. It's almost like it's a silver under there. So it's like a cheaper jewelry that's just like gold plated, right?
Right.
Gold
Awesome.
plated wrapping paper. So for the people that got silver, because some of you got silver paper, you'll have to tell us if the silver also rubs off and if maybe it's copper colored under there, I don't know.
One more thing, Erin, do you mind pushing up your art supplies and just pushing the sketchbook up a little bit more? There we go. Much better. I want to make sure we get a full frame there. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry, as I'm working, it's like scooting closer and closer to me. So now we have this whole side of the page that needs something. So there's a couple different options that I'm thinking about. One of them would be the marker paper. If I decide, you know, I really am enjoying the lightness of this white, maybe I want this whole page to be something and use marker paper that I know won't bleed through to the other page. The other option that I'm thinking about, just looking at what's here in the ephemera that I received. This paper is kind of nice with the colors on this. And I think it would fit just kind of perfectly right there. So that's another thought. And then the third thought I was having was part of this thesaurus. But I think I want to save that for another day. So my last thought was, since this is about work and home and art and kind of who I am and truths and things like that, maybe putting my black envelope there and having some kind of secret thoughts inside. And I think that's what feels most authentic for me right now. And no matter, I know we have some different size envelopes that people receive in this box. So no matter what size envelope you have a spot to hide a secret. And also, of course, add more envelopes if you need more little hidden areas. Again, this is something that I love about art journaling, is that it can be very public and pages that you share and show people. And there can also be secrets. A lot different than like working on a big painting, right? So if I was to paint something on this canvas that's behind me, it's just there, right? It's just out there in the world, visible. But inside the pages of your journal, you can have secrets. You can hide things. You can decide who gets to see them. So I'll leave the black open here. So I think the last thing I'll do on this page, or on the edge with oil pastel. And I'm just going to create some parentheses here for myself. And after I put the secret or the truth or whatever I decide to write in there, I'll describe it a little bit. Okay. Got a couple other fall pages I wanted to show you. So this was another one using the ink watered down with salt put into it, and very fallish looking image from a magazine, and some more ink over here, and a couple layers of protein. And I wanted to show just briefly how the oil pastel can go over something, even a multi-layered something, and just add that last little bit of blending between where the collage page meets the art journal page. So I'm going to put a few little spots with the white in here. I already had some gray, I feel like, on the page. And then if you kind of intentionally go over that point where the collage paper meets the page of the book, the journal, you can make it disappear. Right, so these marks really start to obscure where the page meets, almost like stitches. I suppose that's appropriate for Halloween, right? So this is pretty bright white. There is a little bit of white in this collage image, but that feels a little bit much to me. So I'll probably let that dry and then go back over maybe with another watered down ink. Or actually, maybe what I can do is to have a little bit more of this ink left. This is the watered down ink. And you can see the oil pastel creates a little resist. I can kind of brush it into those little scratches that I made with the pencil. So both the acrylic paint and the oil pastel are going to resist the watered down ink. But it'll soak in a little bit. And if you just let it sit there and dry, then you can go over it later with something and seal it in. I think I'll do just one more little spot over here with the white. When I find a collage image like this where I really kind of like the whole image, it's my art journal, it's not something I'm selling, but I do like to kind of make it mine more, so I try to go in and add other things if I've used a big portion of an image. And I think I'm going to use so if you do this where you're taking the into ink nib thing that's in the lid into oil pastel while it's still wet, just remember that you need to wipe it off before you stick it back into your paint or into your ink. So yeah, you just want to check your end there and make sure it's okay. You can of course wash this off in the sink also to make sure you got it all out. Put that lid back on. Always make your make sure your ink lid is all the way on before you do anything with it. This is a little tiny container of ink, but boy, can that make a mess. Just warning you all now. I've not made too bad of a mess today, but in the ink is not fun to clean up. So be careful. Move this up a little bit. Just bring one more little journal over just because I have a tiny bit of ink left in there. And I wanted to show what happens when you use this ink on really thin paper. So this is watered down on very thin paper that already has alcohol ink on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and dump this thing out. I wanted to show a couple things that you can do. So I'm dipping the dropper just into puddles, and you can make wonderful, fun little circles. You should definitely experiment with that. And again, trying out this is where I'm starting to get messy, and I'm glad I took that white shirt off. But seeing what other kind of circles you can make, right? So here, that's a Venn diagram that just accidentally happened, right? Wasn't planning on that one. But that might be another one that you decide to play with. Very glorious little mess there. You can see how this really soaks into this very thin paper. Actually end up with a Venn diagram on this side too, so I can play with a couple of different versions of that. All right. So while some of these pages are drying, why don't we see if anyone would like to share? And that'll give the pages a chance to dry, and we can look at a couple more afterwards.
Okay, so if anybody wants to share, I have gallery view on now. So if you want to virtually raise your hand, physically raise your hand, I can spy on you and see if you want to show some of your stuff. And I'll also spotlight you so everyone else can see it. This is the first box of the season, so I totally get it if everybody wants to just have a workshop. I'm all for that.
Oh.
All right. In the meantime, Erin, why don't you take it away while everyone else continues to work. I fully support this.
Good. All right. So this page is kind of still wet, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it a bit anyway. And I wanted to show something that you could do with, you received a couple different Post-it notes in your box. And I'm going to start with this one, with the gridded paper. And you can absolutely leave it as a Post-it and kind of float it around in your journal. It might be something you want to do, like put some of your ideas that you hear about that you want to journal and use a Post-it to put that idea down, come back to it later. Sometimes I'll do that when I'm sitting at my desk, if my desk doesn't happen to be this desk that's covered in art supplies. And I'll write down ideas, and then I'll actually just stick those Post-its straight into my journal and then make art around it. Okay, so I just sucked up straight ink, and I'm going to put it into this jar. Now, sometimes I absolutely work right out of the ink container itself, but because I know I'm about to kind of do a lot of brush work, I want to make sure that I get the lid back on that container of ink. So I have a bubble here, so you can see this. I'll try to get it closer to the camera. And I'm just going to touch the page. Oh, it works. It's so awesome. So this isn't going to work for you every time, but look how cool that is. So it's kind of a fun art game. We've got kids. Can be really fun. So you kind of suck up the ink and then spit it out real fast. And as you can see, it's not perfect. You won't always get a big bubble like I got that first time. But you can see it, what it creates is this like amazing, perfect splatter. So those ones ended up smaller. That one was perfect. That's like a once in a lifetime bubble. Oh, I got another one. No sooner spoken. This is why I said don't wear a white shirt today. So this would be really fun to take a time-lapse video of doing this. Maybe I'll do that later and post it on the ArtJournalSnacks Instagram. let's see if I can tilt this without it popping. Kind of taking a three-dimensional art journal to a whole different view. You want to get some of those popping in slow-mo. So you can see this is very bubbly inside there, inside my jar. Yeah, definitely don't put it in. That would be, well, maybe do it like sitting in the bathtub. That might be okay. Maybe not if you rent. Although I've certainly done very messy art things in rental situations. Story for another day. Okay. So you see this is kind of an addictive process. You just want to keep seeing if you can get another good bubble. So what to do with the rest of that ink? So I've got a wet paintbrush, a very soft paintbrush, and I am going to paint, this is just straight ink. So you can see how really rich and dark this ink is. And you can get journals that have black pages, but I've tried that a couple of times working on an art journal with all black pages. And it sounded like a fun adventure at first. But after a while, it was just like, gosh, this is really dark. This is a very dark journal. Dark on the pigment and dark in content. So since then, I just like to kind of mix in some dark pages. And that works a little better. I'm trying to let my bubble splatters see where they are. You can see some spots the ink is sitting kind of thick on the page, and it will dry that way, kind of raised up. So that's another thing to experiment with, is letting the ink dry kind of heavy on the page. So if you let your very soft brush get really saturated with ink, and then use up all the ink on there, you get this wonderful kind of scratchy, dry brush look. It's a great way to get hair onto creatures. I'm going to preserve some of the edges of the post-it note there, but hide some with the dark ink. And that splotch, I'm not super happy with that one, but I'm going to let it be. I'm just going to maybe get just the very edge of it. So this is the same principle as using that paper towel, just using the very edge of the brush to soak up a little bit of the ink. Really soaked in. Now, another thing that you can see here, if you look closely, is where the thread is of the book. Now, a thing to know is if you use something really thick like this, like straight out of the bottle ink, and it gets to the thread, it will go through to another page wherever that those stitches come out. So will that thread color. Put that one over here. That's stacking up journals. And I'm still got this ink on this brush. I'll go back to this little journal. I'm trying to find a blank page.
while it's quiet, Erin, I'm going to jump on here real quick. Got a couple questions in the chat. One of them is, anybody know how to revive a white gel pen? Another is, how did you get the ink bubble? I can't seem to manage it. So we got those two questions.
Can you hear that? I was kind of sucking a little air with the pipette.
Yes.
So, and then if you look, there's a bunch of bubbles in there. So then you just kind of suck up the bubbles and the air and you push it out fast. And it's not going to work every time, and then once you get a bubble, if you just kind of slowly push a little more air into it, you can make it get a little bigger. Ooh, that's a lot of bubbles. That's going to be a big pop. You have to kind of lean back when you do this. So it just takes a little bit of experimenting. Again, it's not going to work every time, but getting the ink kind of frothy seems to help. Now, can you add soap? Yes, you can add a little bit of soap and then you're going to get a little bit more reliable bubbles. But then what I find is it adds soap to the ink. So then it kind of smears on your paper a little bit, but you can experiment with it and see what you think. Reviving a white gel pen. Two things that I've tried. One is making sure it's warm enough. If it's very cold, the ink will also be very cold. You can try putting a little bit of water on a page and kind of running it through there. The other thing I've tried, and this is, well, I guess since we're making messes today, we can talk about it, but you can kind of take the pen apart entirely, pull the cartridge. So if you pull the tube where the ink actually is, pull that away, tap it a bunch of times and push it back on, kind of being pen surgeon. You can try that. Again, not always a way to do it, and sometimes it makes a bigger mess. But then you can just draw with that tip, right? Just like use up the rest of the ink that way. Yeah, rubbing alcohol is also a good tip. Okay. I got one good splotch there from the ink. Let's see how we're doing here. So here's another appropriate for me fall page. Some of you may have seen, if you follow me on Instagram, that my parrot Griffin, who you sometimes hear in the background, was pet of the month, or is pet of the month this month, in Sonoma County. So I took the article, the newspaper article, and I put it here in my art journal. And I think that Griffin definitely deserves a little gold border around his little picture here. So think about using the metallic pens to kind of highlight, as you go through this quarter's journal, using those metallics to really highlight the important stuff. It's the stuff that really matters, the stuff you're maybe very proud of, your accomplishments, right? It's like giving yourself a gold star, or in Griffin's case, giving him his gold star, which he would probably chew up. I really like using fancy metallic pens over things like newspaper, because it's, again, it's kind of that high and low art materials. Here is a newspaper clipping, and then also here is this fancy gold metallic pen. And then I think I'll go around the headline as well. And Sammy isn't left out. I mentioned her in the description of Griffin for the article, so she's also famous. Is that the rest of this watered down ink? So the other thing you can do with the dropper is on a wet page. And I like to do it with the same ink, just watered down, and then go in with the straight ink, and just with the dropper, I'm pushing it down onto the page and kind of letting the ink come out, but also squirting it out a little bit. This is kind of the opposite look of salt. So the salt is going to push the ink away. Ink into a wet page is going to start with the pigment and kind of explode out. So it almost looks like fireworks, which is appropriate for this celebration page for Griffin. And this is another technique that would be really fun to watch in slow motion.
Erin, I am mesmerized by this technique.
You should just do like
I want to do this with every ink bottle that I own.
Yeah.
Now that I have an ink dropper, like
it's
endless.
huge sheet of watercolor paper. Let the explosions go into one another. Yeah. And then you can see like right there where it's starting to break apart and like where they come together. So interesting. And since you have two droppers, I don't have any clean water here, but I'm just going to go in with a little bit of more water. So interesting. So things to be careful of, as you can see happening right here. The newspaper will soak up that ink and kind of go further than you want it to. So just be gentle with that. You can go over anything in newspaper with matte medium. Yeah, I don't know if you can see the difference between the watered down ink and where the ink went straight on, but it's fascinating. It almost looks like looking at something through a microscope. Definitely have to watch it happening. And keep this from going everywhere.
I love this page. I cannot wait until it's dry. Will you please show us on the mix group what it looks like when it's completely dry?
Yeah, I definitely will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just refound my microscope lenses for my phone, so maybe I'll get some microscope images of like those little tiny areas there. Imagine it kind of looks like fractals. I'm gonna very carefully set this over here so it can dry. So, two choices. I can play on another page, or I have another art journal that I haven't done a tour of that I kind of did during the summer and the beginning of the fall, if you'd like to look at that. Someone should let us know in the chat what you would like me to do. Sure, okay. Give me 1 second, I'll grab it. Okay. All right, so some of you maybe remember this ArtJournalSnacks journal that I was working on during mostly summer. And I finished it the other day and didn't get a chance yet to do a tour, so I thought we could do a tour of it. So tracing my hand in there, this is this wonderful little pen, which gets such lovely tiny lines. And some of these pages maybe look familiar. You saw them happen live on Mix. So another plug for Mix, if you're not a Mix member, which you definitely should be, and if you tune in there every so often, I'll jump on and show live a page happening. Some pages from our newspaper club newspaper. This is a page that I don't know if I've showed this page, but I maybe showed it happening, but I'm so satisfied with the way that this chain looks. This is some broken chain from my grandmother. And it just makes me so happy. It's got like a little sound to it, this page. More newspaper club pages. This is the page that Sarah convinced me to leave it plain. A page about trying to skateboard again after not doing that for a while. Not my finest moment. Some of these pages, again, you maybe saw evolve. Here's another of those one material 3 ways. And a little bit of Venn diagram in there too. I did this the other day while I was teaching. I drew using the Notes app on my phone. I drew this little crow and then I printed it out and then I drew back on top of it. And I found the newspaper bird and fun. So to see them brings me joy. This page, I think many of you saw happen with the What's in My Journal poem. Emotions watching. More experimenting with different materials from different boxes. This is a photograph that I took in my old office. And this one I actually did thinking about our box and our oil pastels. This was the cover of a catalog and I had saved this knowing that we were getting oil pastels in this box. Kind of fun to think about texture, and this one of Griffin's little feathers, and just such a lovely material, oil pastels. They're matte and they're very rich and creamy and create such wonderful texture. This is my affirmation to you all if you're feeling like I just don't know how to start a journal. So my recommendation is to have your snack from your box and just start. I think you all saw this page happen. Postcard, that was the first postcard I received in my PO box. Here's the emotion wheel. A little more collaging. This was from to a friend, and actually today was her first day at work. I was able to hire her at my new workplace, but she gave me this little crow with a crown for my new office, which I don't have yet. My office is under construction, but this was the packaging. So my quote new office is under construction. This was a page I was playing with. Some of you maybe saw this happen, but this is just Elmer's glue on this paper, and then the materials we received in the ArtSnacks quarterly box. And then actually took an AR app and I took a picture of this, and then I made it talk. I won't post it because it's super disturbing, but it was a fun thing to create. This was a directive that we did in a class I was teaching. Imagining if you had a remote control for something in your life, what would you want it to do? And this was another image from a class I was teaching. It's kind of disturbing, but I liked using the thread here. So the plane going down. Thinking about art materials and what's good about them versus technology, and I was saying that a crayon is immediate, direct, accessible, and simple. This is, I guess this page is like a love note to a crayon.
Hey, Erin, I'm going to jump in here real quick. We got about 10 minutes left of class, believe it or not. What do you think? You want to do another show and tell, or what do you think?
I'd say thank you. Let's do a show and tell.
If anybody wants to share what they made, give me a virtual hand, give me a physical hand. I will keep an eye out for you and I'll spotlight you so you can show us what you made. All right, I see. I'm going to do Jill, and then I'll do Anne Marie. So Jill, feel free to unmute, and I'm going to spotlight your. There you go. All right, so you're spotlit with great lighting.
My window faces west and the sun is setting and it's very bright. So I have all my blinds down. I'm like blinded. Anyway, yeah, I am actually working in the old style journal because I preferred to do that, but it actually takes the ink very well. This isn't the ink page though. This is the using the oil pastels and then the fabric scrumbling across, and then the other part with the tissue paper, and then some collage stuff I made myself. But the ink, oh my gosh, I actually had one of these ink bottles from before, but boy, look at that coverage.
Wow.
It's just luscious.
It's so nice.
And it didn't bleed through. It curled the page, and this is on the back side. So it didn't bleed through. It curled a little bit, but that's totally fine by me. But yeah, the coverage was really cool. And then those are my bubbles that I did, which I had a lot of fun with. So yeah, and I've been playing with the pen that came, the nice little thin pen. I actually don't like super fine pens, but I journaled an entire page. I recently had surgery, and so I journaled about it, and it covered the whole page in this really fine pen. So wow. I loved that. Oh yeah, and then, well, this may be TMI, but this is the my page about my surgery. I kept some of the stuff. I had my gallbladder out, and that's been an experience. Positive and feeling better, but anyway, just thought I would share. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Hope you're feeling better.
Lots of EKG little, they always look at me funny. Can I just keep these while they're peeling them off? Like, I'm just gonna keep these. What are you doing with those? Don't worry.
They left them on me.
They just left them on you.
I found them a day later. I'm like, what is this?
It's now ephemera.
Oh yeah.
It's now ephemera.
Ephemera.
Amazing.
Glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to spotlight Anne Marie. Feel free to unmute yourself. All right, show us what you are making.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
So I did not make anything today. I had a bunch of technical difficulties, but my heart goes out to the person with the gel pen question, because I had this killer set of gel pens and like a couple dozen, so many colors, and then all of a sudden they weren't working. So Erin, this is to you. Hopefully this is like a highlight of your day. So I've been doing this with the art journal all year on the different classes that Erin's been doing. And she said early in January, do different things, like, like today, like draw with the pipette and, do the end of your brush, not the brush side. And I'm like, no, rules, rules, rules. Well, I got so tired of not being able to use my pens this summer that I cut them open and I started playing with the ink. And it was so much fun, Erin. Oh my gosh, the things that came out because the gel ink was no more stuck inside was so fun. And sometimes when Erin says, here's the paper towel and here's the book and try this and all the different things, like I was just like, oh my God, I can't do them all. I can't keep track. And now, like, I don't even have to keep track. It just happens. It's so much fun. It's like, oh wait, I don't want to throw that piece of paper towel away yet. So I hope that someone takes the risk and breaks your pens if you can't get them to work, and do different things. Put them right in your journal, put them on a different paper, put them in a cup, put them in a lid. But it was fantastic. It was so much fun.
I think we need to make a t-shirt that says break your pens. That is incredible. What a story. Thank you for sharing.
It has to be like break your pens, YER. And
Okay.
like Sammy can say it.
All right. Yeah, I think I put to everybody in the chat. I took one of the cartridges, I took a straight edge, I put like a piece of cardboard down, and I just like made a big slit and waited to see what would happen. And like messy, yeah, but the part oozed out, and then I picked it up and I just poured ink onto my journal. And as I said in my chat note, it was amazing on so many levels, like breaking the rules and being free. And then what the ink did, the gel ink was so fun to play with. So thank you, Erin. Thank you, ArtSnacks and Sarah. Thank you, everyone. And get out there and try something crazy.
Hey, can you show us some of the art on your wall behind you? It looks very nice.
Oh, sure. I don't know if that makes it any better. It's kind of glary. So I live in Washington State. I live in a little town called Bellingham. Let's see, how do I get this?
We can see it.
Okay. We're 90 miles north of Seattle. And this painting is from a local artist, Ben Mann, M-A-N-N. I'm sure if you Google him, you will see his stuff. And he's delightful. I took an art class with him, I think in 2021, like after we got shots, I gotten a gift certificate, and we had to wait a while because of COVID, but I think it was 2021. I had like 90 minutes in his studio with him. It was super fun. But this was a treat I bought for myself, and yeah, he's amazing. And I'll show it quick one more time, and it's probably out of time, but Bellingham looks out to the San Juan Islands. So this was one of his paintings about the San Juan Islands.
Yeah, wonderful.
Nice.
One of my
Thanks for
favorite
asking.
in the world. I love the San Juan. That's
Yeah, we
wonderful.
need to do a field
Awesome.
trip to the San Juan Islands.
Oh yeah,
That's what it
I'm
sounds like.
into it. There was actually an art journaling conference that happened in Washington at Bainbridge Island quite a few years ago. I'll talk about it on Nick sometime. But it was
Okay.
called Journal Fest, and it was so fun. That's actually where I learned that technique that I showed you all, which we should play with again since we have ink, where you take the pizza cutter and roll it through the ink and then make beautiful lines. So we'll do some pizza cutting
Sounds like a trip for the summer next year. ArtSnacks to San Juan Islands.
Art Journal Snacks on tour.
Yeah.
I'll put a good word in for that. Does anybody else want to share? We've got about 3 minutes left. I just want to hold some space if anybody wants to show off what they're making. Feel free to raise your hand or virtually raise your hand. Happy to spotlight you. I do see if you go to gallery view, we're looking at Dana G. Sorry to call you out, but I'm looking at your art. So if you want to talk a little bit more about it, if not, we're just all looking at it. Looks real cool. And is actually a fun way to participate in the live stream. So that's pretty cool. Oh, okay. We've got a virtual hand. Cindy, feel free to unmute yourself and I will spotlight you.
Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So this was what I did today, which is not just super. I didn't know I did. I see the other lady also used the little swirly paper, which I liked, but I really was going to show y'all. My cover was very intense. I put a lot into this, and it's a lot more collage than art. Because I've just had a whole lot. My son got married. My cat has disappeared that I love so much, and she's been gone 23 days today. And then we had the eclipse the same day. My son got married like a couple hours after the eclipse outdoors, and it was beautiful. It's just been a very emotional last week. So I did a whole lot into this cover. I got a little carried away. I was like up all through the night throwing stuff on here. So anyway, I thought I'd share.
Thank you for sharing that, Cindy, and your cat comes home to you. Sammy also was missing one time, and it's
rough. It's rough.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I want to highlight something you said, because I want to gently encourage the opposite, which is you said it's a little bit much. And gosh, if we have a little bit much in our art journal or on our art journal, go for it. More texture, more color, more.
I don't know when to say when, so I just kind of
That's a good thing.
I'll just have sticking stuff on there.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We're off to a good start with this fall journal. And hopefully you're finding it fun to try a different shape and size. And I am looking forward to continuing to work on this journal with you all.
Erin, is that an art project behind you?
This one? No, this is a block the chaos of my kitchen. I'm not in the studio anymore. It's someone else's art project that I inherited. So it's just a white encaustic surface. I'll make it into something someday. Maybe next time it'll have something on it. We'll see.
I asked her the same thing when we first started the live stream and was like, oh, are we doing a green screen now?
Hey, could we send you something and you could stick it on the board? All the art journal people could send some. What do you suggest? We could send you and we could all put it up there.
That'd be pretty cool. Okay, so I love rather interesting like covers in the street. Like we have them here that say no dumping drains to ocean, and it's got a fish on it, and have yet to get a piece of paper out there to get a rubbing from it, but maybe I will do that with one of these pieces of paper. Those things I love. I actually stopped traffic one time in Santa Fe in the middle of the street trying to get a rubbing.
So you like rubbings of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Could you show us what that is, and I'll go out and get some rubbings.
Yeah, a crayon and a piece of paper, and just I'll post about it on Mix.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like a fun project.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, before my dog bites my head off, he's just jumping on me. I want to thank everyone for being here. We're at time right now. So again, class is recorded. You'll be able to check it out again probably tomorrow evening. We need at least like a full day to put it online. But in the meantime, thank you everyone for being here live. Thank you, Erin, for your time. I hope everyone found this time useful and exciting, and we'll see you on Mix. We'd love to see what you made.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a good night.